rolling river God. Little stones of snow, only once the water passes through. Now I am a stone, rough and grainy still, trying to reconcile this river's chill. But when I close my eyes and feel you rushing by, I know that time brings change, and change takes time. And when the sunset comes, my prayer will be just one, that you might pick me up and notice I am just a little smoother in your hands. Sometimes raging wild, sometimes swollen high, but never have I known this river dry. The deepest part of you is where I want to stay and feel the sharpest edges wash away. But when I close my eyes, I feel you rushing by, and I know that time brings change, and change takes time. When the sunset comes, my prayer will be just one, that you might pick me up and notice I am I'm just a little smoother in your hands. Rolling river God, these little stones are smooth. It's only once the water passes through. Let's go deeper. Can't name them all, but I just want to name a few. You're sweet, you're marvelous, you're wonderful, almighty. Sweeter than the honey in the honeycomb, oh dear Spirit, we thank you. As we release and let go, we step into gratitude for this moment, understanding that this is the only moment that we have. Closing our eyes, understanding that this river of water is washing over us. How grateful, how grateful, how grateful we are for this. So much more. All that has happened and all that is to come, but for this moment, we say thank you. Thank you. And in this season of gratitude and thanks, we take this time to breathe, to be one with the one. The only one. Spirit divine, God omnipotent. Pure Spirit. Only the presence of God is in this place. I can feel God's mighty power and grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of God is in this place. All right. Well, good morning again. Normally, I'm glad we had that little meditation that we had, because coming out of that song, it just, you just can't jump right into a talk. So you do a little turnaround. So here I am. It's so good to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you. It's my first time. I haven't been in Cincinnati in years. I think I came to Cincinnati when I was in Smoky Joe's Cafe, the first national tour, and we played Cincinnati for a week or so. So it is good to be with you today. I bring you greetings from Agape International Spiritual Center, Dr. Michael Beckwith and Ricky Byers Beckwith. They send their love, and so does the entire Agape community. I was born by the river in a little old tent. I know you all know the song. You're looking at me like you don't know it. I wasn't born too close to the Cumberland River, which runs through the city of Nashville, Tennessee. I was actually born in a little community on the outskirts, which has now been incorporated into the city of Nashville. It's called Lake Providence, nestled in the southeastern quadrant of Davidson County. And the community was founded in 1868 by a missionary by the name of Larry A. Thompson. And the story goes as this. They say he was stumbling through this field of thickets and brush and planted his feet, and he said, right here is where I'm going to build my church, because this is the providence, the divine direction of God that has led me here. And build the church he did. So my great-great-grandparents, many other settlers, this was right after the Emancipation Proclamation, 1868, all of these people congregate to this little community. And years later, I come along. So I didn't get the news like everybody else did until my grandmother sat me down and told me stories of how this small community became one of the major points of interest in the city of Nashville. Well, they had cobblers and seamstresses and dairy farmers and people who had their own produce shops. I said, well, Granny, how did they sustain themselves? She said, well, people took from the land, made good for their families, and then they gave it back. That's the only way that we survived. I said, oh, okay. So in essence, she was teaching me what community really was, if this in fact was a community, and it was. In 1971, by the time I came along, this was a burgeoning community. My grandmother was born in 1901, and I would stay with Granny until my brother and sister got home from school or my parents came home from work. She was a self-taught pianist, and one of her favorite treats was to sit me down and teach me hymns and spirituals. Now at the age of 3, 4, and 5, I didn't have patience for that. My grandmother used to insist that I come and sit by her knee. She didn't have a piano at home. She couldn't afford one, so she would pretend like she was tapping these notes out on her knees. And she said, open your mouth and just repeat after me. And of course, to get out of it, I would say anything. Granny, I don't know that song. My grandmother would say, well, just open your big mouth and repeat after me. And she would open her mouth and she'd say, great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not thy compassions. Oh, they fail not. As thou hast been and forever will be, great is thy faithfulness. And I would look up at my grandmother's face, and tears would be streaming down, streaming down. At my young age, I didn't know what was happening to Granny. I thought something was wrong with her. I'd tap her on her knee and say, Granny, Granny, come back. What's wrong, Granny? My grandmother had a tacit type of agreement. She wouldn't talk a lot. She'd just look at you and nod. Granny's just fine. I could not have articulated what had happened in the room at that young age, and I still don't know what to call it other than there was a visitation. Something had filled my grandmother. It had filled the room, and it had touched me. There were hundreds, it seemed like, of children in my neighborhood, and the last thing you wanted to be was uncool. So to be cool, you played sports. If you were a young boy, you wanted to play sports, and I jumped right in. I became a celebrated athlete. I went to college on a football scholarship. But you know what? I never could get away from those hymns. Music was palpable in my community. As a matter of fact, on Saturdays, it was my brother, my sister, and my mother and I, we would have to get up and dust the house. And to make it go faster, my brother and my sister, who were both over a decade older than me, they would put on music, and I tell you, we would just dance around the house. And of course, I was the youngest, so I felt at liberty to do whatever I wanted to. All kinds of dances. Seemed as if when I was running down the football field, this music, this essence of life that had run through, current through my grandmother, was chasing me down the football field, my elbows and my knees. But I wanted to play professional football. That was the only thing on my mind. I was academically inclined, but that academic also led me to believe that if I did well in school, I could continue playing football, and that would lead me to the professional ranks. Well, it didn't happen. Graduated from college, and then I started working out for some professional scouts, thinking that maybe I'd get picked up as a free agent. That didn't happen. I got a job with IBM. Oh. You know, there are perks being the youngest. You know, I got everything that I wanted just by smiling. You know, please. Then there was the other side. Growing up in the South, everybody had what they called a hand on your life. My grandmother said, oh, he's going to be a preacher. I can see it. My mother said, no, he's going to be a business executive. My uncles thought I was going to be a famous baseball player. I really knocked that ball out of the park. And to get everything I wanted, I appeased everybody's wishes. But this time I was a little stuck. Got a job with IBM, really good. But I wasn't the happiest for my success. My mother was. I called my mother and I said, Mom, guess what? She said, I said, I just got a job with IBM. Ooh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. That money, no benefits. Ooh, you can stay there for 25 or 30 years and retire. They give you this development book at IBM. And I guess I had been on the job for about 6 months, and I began to page through it, and I stumbled upon a question. Where do you see yourself at IBM in 2 years? Where do you see yourself at IBM in 5 years? And instinctively, I picked up a pencil and I wrote, not here. I didn't know what was happening at that time. All of the things that I thought that I could possibly be were running out. This wasn't my strong suit, so to speak. I thought maybe the grass would be greener on the other side. So I leaped from IBM to another company, moved to a large city, moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Same scenario, great benefits, fast track, and a year from the date that I started, they fired me. Well, I didn't call my mother first. I actually called one of my really good friends, and I was talking to him over the phone, and I said, well, you know, I'm sitting here reading this letter of termination. They just fired me. He said, no, they didn't fire you. I said, oh, yes, they did. I'll read you the letter. Dear Mr. Holt, as of March 1st, 19. He said, no, Charles, they released you. Well, when you think of release, you think knowingly that you're going from one thing to another. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I said, well, what did they release me to? He said, you know, all of those nights that you spend at the jazz club, at open mic, after work on Friday and Saturday, just to wash the week off. And you sing those songs that you say you grew up with. My Funny Valentine, God Bless the Child, and every now and then one of those hymns that your grandmother taught you. He said, man, you light the room up when you sing. I said, I do? That's interesting. I said, well, what should I do? He said, why don't you jump in and start auditioning for shows? It would be great for you to do a musical. And I was crazy enough to believe him, so I thought, okay, I'll try to get started in this business called show business. And it seemed like everything I auditioned for, I got cast in. I got cast in big parts. And I finally got a big break at the Alliance Theater. The Alliance Theater is probably the most revered regional theater in the South. And at the time, Kenny Leon was the artistic director. He's gone on to do Broadway and those types of things. And he called me and he said, look, we're having this production of James Baldwin's The Amen Corner go up in 3 weeks. Someone just dropped out of the show. I don't know you, you don't know me, but there are 3 people in the show who do know you and who I trust. And they say you would be the best person to fill his shoes. I said, okay. He said, well, under one condition. I said, what is that? He said, you better be good. That was the treat. The gift happened one evening, 8 o'clock show. We were getting ready to go upstairs for the top of Act 2. And I'm in my dressing room. They call time to places. Places, places, please. This is your call to places. Places to the top of Act 2. And I'm about to make my way upstairs to the stage. And all of a sudden, when I got up out of my chair, I heard a voice say, it's time. So yes, time to go upstairs. But then this was not over the intercom. It was from somewhere else. And I looked around the room. No one was in the room with me at the time. And I thought, wow, I must be working too hard. I'm hearing things. These voices. Took another step, was about to go out the door, and I heard, Charles, it's time. In that instant, my mind began to rewind back to a year prior. I met a gentleman by the name of Adrian Bailey. He was down doing Boys from Syracuse, which is another musical classic. And he said, I heard you can sing, man. I heard you could sing. One of the friends in the show told me that you could sing. I want to hear you sing. And I started singing for him. And he said, you would be great for the show that I'm getting ready to go back to premiere in New York. I said, what's the name of the show? He said, Smokey Joe's Cafe. You should go get the soundtrack and listen to all of that music. Your voice is great for that music. And I did. I went and got the soundtrack. And I tell you, I found myself a few times just walking down the street, and I would get to a certain place and that music would be vibrating and resonating with me, and I would just strike a pose in the middle of the street as if I was on stage. And I could look out and see those people in the audience, hundreds and thousands of faces staring at me while I strut across the stage and dance across the stage. Sing my way across the stage, and I would come to. And in that moment, I thought, maybe this is what this voice is trying to get me to realize. Maybe it's time for me to move to New York. I was crazy enough to believe that. I wanted to be on Broadway. Why not? The big stage. I went and purchased my ticket, one-way ticket. I'm going to New York. Well, you know, if you've had any kind of Southern raising, you know you have to clear that with one person before you make any type of move. Your mother. And I call my mother, and my mother's interesting. She has this very spot-on way of understanding when you're trying to throw her a curveball. So I call, and she answers the phone, and I say, hey, Mom, how you doing? I said, I have something to tell you. I'm moving to New York to be on Broadway. She said, son, let me get something straight. You graduated from a top-tier school. You got a job with IBM right out of college on a fast track, making great money, all those benefits. You left IBM. You went to another company, same scenario, and they fired you. Now you're telling me you want to move to New York to be on Broadway. New York's the most insane place on the face of the planet. And being an actor is the most unstable job there is in the world. You've gone from one opposite to the other. Let me ask you something, son. Will you do me a favor before you go? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, will you go to the business section of the yellow pages for me? I said, yes, I will. She said, thumb all the way down till you get to the letter P. I said, okay. She said, thumb all the way through P till you get to the word psychiatrist. I said, yes. She said, call that first listener. Call it right now. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. And you set your appointment and you go in and tell them all of your troubles. Tell them what you just told me, everything, every detail. And when you come out, you'll be okay. Because you have lost your mind. Well, I obliged. I said, Mom, I will. I'll call. I'll set an appointment and I'll go in and see the psychiatrist. There's only one thing. I've already purchased my ticket. I'm going to New York. I could not have explained to anyone what this was that was calling me to New York. It was almost like the same type of feeling I had when I listened to my grandmother sing those songs. I didn't know what it was in that room. I could not tell you what exactly had happened to my grandmother, but something was calling her. It was speaking to a place in her that only she could understand about. And this was speaking to a place in me that I didn't know how to articulate from, but I knew that it was calling me. And I left for New York July 6, 1996. I got to New York, I put my things down in the place that I was staying, and I ran to West 87th Street and Columbus Avenue, and there was everything. There were taxis flying down the avenue like they were at the Indianapolis Speedway, dogs barking, people everywhere. It was beautiful. And I opened my arms and I said, I'm home. Well, of course, you have that part of you that understands that wherever you are, you're right where you're supposed to be, and you are home. But in this case, I did have the other. Perhaps it was my mother's voice coming to me. You're not at home. You have never been there before. How can you say that you're at home when you're somewhere that you've not even visited before? I don't know. I just know that the way that I feel inside of me is right at peace right where I am. I was on fast track then to getting my first Broadway show. Auditioned for Rent. Rent was the hottest show, hottest ticket on Broadway in 1996. 525,600 minutes. I wanted to be a part of that. Didn't get into audition. There was a line wrapped around the entire block. 7:30 to 8 o'clock at night. I was from here to those doors getting in. Disappointed, walking back uptown, I passed a newsstand. There was a backstage, which is the Actors Bible in New York. And I was thumbing through and I saw Auditions for Jesus Christ Superstar next Friday. Ooh, that gives me enough time to get the music, learn the songs, and be ready. That Friday ran around really quickly. I was about to get up and go to the audition, and there that voice was. That voice that needed to be integrated, because I knew that right where I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But I had some catching up to do here. Ah, they come a dime a dozen. You should stay in and rest your voice. It's going to be another long line. You probably won't get to sing this time either. But then I heard the other voice, that one which had called me. What did you come here for? What did you come here to do? I jumped up out of my seat and I went to the audition, and yes, it was a line wrapped around the block, about 400 and 500 people to be exact. But this time I got in. The accompanist was sitting right over there. I was so nervous, my hands just sweaty, sweaty, sweaty. And I went over, I had prepared a Latin. I can show you the world shining, shimmering, splendid. I had rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed in my mind. And I got to the pianist, the accompanist, and all of a sudden I said, I don't want to do this song. He said, well, what do you want to sing? I said, I don't know. He said, sing an anthem, Charles. I said, what anthem should I sing? He said, sing America the Beautiful. I said, okay. Little X on the floor that marks the spot. Stood behind that X, hands dripping with sweat. And all of a sudden, I forgot the words to America the Beautiful. My grandmother, bless her heart, she had made her transition the year before, but she was in the room. I heard a voice say, just open your big mouth and the words will come to you. Sing, oh beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties, above the fruited plain, America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. And I couldn't forget my grandmother, and I saw, and crown thy good with sisterhood, from sea to shining sea. America, America, America. And after I finished, they leapt to their feet and started clapping. Being the good little southern gentleman that I was, I looked at them and I said, thank you, and walked out the door. Well, there was 450 of us down to 12. Only 6 were going on tour. Waited for everybody to call their names. New York is an interesting place when it comes to people talking to you. Be so abrasive sometimes. So the monitor comes out and he's getting ready to announce the 6 that are going on tour. And he says, look, we only have 6 spaces. If we call your name, stay. If we don't, get out. Get your things and get out. So everyone's waiting with bated breath. I hear Eddie Talton Jackson, Seth Hampton, and Gabrielle Grushas. And then they say Charles Holt. Charles Holt? That's my name. I go on tour with Ted Neely and Carl Anderson, the original Jesus and Judas from 1972's motion picture. I play Simon. I understudy Carl Anderson as Judas. What have I stepped into? Next audition was for Smokey Joe's Cafe, the one that started it, February 1997. Do you know how cold it is in New York in February? 600 of us auditioning for one role. They call us, they stack us, 24 to the stage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, look. When we called your name, you get up here and you sing 16 bars. Once you're finished, step back. 3 days it took them to go from 600 to 24. Say thank you for your time. By the end of the day, we will have hired someone, casted someone in Smokey Joe's Cafe, the first national tour. And I'm walking out the door, and the monitor looks at me and he says, hey, you. They like you. I say, thank you. 45 minutes later, I get a call from Richard Frankel Productions. Charles Holt, we'd like to offer you the role in Smokey Joe's Cafe. Will you accept? Wait a minute, let me think about that for a minute. Absolutely. I go on the road for 12 months. months in the States, and in the 13th month we go to Japan. Okinawa, Fukuoka, and Tokyo for 2 weeks. Things are fleeting, but something is trying to get my attention. It was the essence of who I was. Who are you? And what have you really come to do? It was all a divine setup, so to speak, I found out. But this time I'm just going along for the ride. I'm like a kid in a candy store. Smokey Joe's Cafe became the longest running show on Broadway history in the category of musical review. 5 years. I went to Europe. I played the first Rocky in the Rocky Horror Show. I didn't call and tell my mother about that one. You played who? Head on what? And then I came back to New York and I got a call from Disney for The Lion King. Lion King was the biggest thing on Broadway at that time. It was the biggest thing in the world. And instead of calling 400 or 500 or 600 of us, they called 4. 4 of us to audition for The Lion King on Broadway. I was so nervous I could not sit still. And they sang us, and it was exactly the opposite of every regimen of musical review, musical auditioning. We didn't sing a song. They scaled us. La 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 la. They scaled us 4 times, 4 separate occasions, and then we danced. They said, okay, by 10:30 tonight, one of you will be hired. Well, I glued my phone to my ear, hoping that they would call. And by 10:30, 10:31, no one had called me, and I said, well, you know what? I befriended a gentleman. I hope he got it. And I was making my way to call him, and the message alert light went off on my phone. I said, wow, that's interesting. No one has called me all day. I know. And listen to my message. Charles Holt, this is Mark Brandon. Call me. We've been trying to get in touch with you all day. Got some great news. And I called him, and he said, look, finally got you a show on Broadway. Welcome to The Lion King. Life would change forever. But it was years later that I heard that message in my head again. We finally got you one. And I said, Spirit, what is this trying to tell me? And he said, when you step out, everything will align with your divine purpose. Those people, places, and things that you could not possibly have called into your mind, into your intellect, will act on your behalf. December 17, 1999, my Broadway debut in The Lion King. We were all in the back, all of the animals. We all played them, you know. How many of you saw the show? If you remember that big gray elephant, I was in the back, right there, a birth of the elephant coming down the aisle. So we're getting closer to the stage. I'm looking out of my costume, peeping out of these little holes in the costume, and I see these mouths, just unbelievable. Just can't believe this. Tears streaming down faces, and just joy filled the room. And I got to the top of the stage in the crescendo of the circle of life. It's a circle of life, and it moves us all. And I heard a voice say, look out into the audience. And I looked, And for a split second, I went back to Atlanta. And that little young man who made that pose struck that pose and looked out into the sea of possibility. That's exactly what I was staring into at that moment. All of that had just been called into manifestation. Ooh, I'm just living it. I was in Lion King for 4 years and 8 months. And after 3 years, I remember early one morning, about 3 or 4 o'clock, I woke up to the sound of I wasn't in the show, I was in my bed. I said, oh, it's time to go. I'm singing Lion King in my sleep. I called my friends, my mentors at the time, and I said, look, I'm getting ready to leave Lion King. He said, why? I said, because I'm bored and I need to go. I said, we'll do this. You go home and you write 5 reasons why you should leave Lion King. I said, okay. All I could come up with was, I'm bored. 5 times, different ways of saying it. I'm bored. I went to the theater one day before the show, a couple of hours before curtain, and I was going to take a nap. Got upstairs to my dressing room and I became restless. I went down and I laid on the stage. I was looking up, the lights, the catwalk, and I asked the question that would change everything. I said, why am I still here in Lion King? I said, why am I here on the planet? What did I come to do? And I believe inside of this question was the answer. Quite possibly the answer was nudging the question, get him to ask you, get him to ask you. Because I have the answer. And I closed my eyes, and I remember December 17, 1999. So do you remember the faces? Do you remember the energy in the room? Do you remember how everything was illuminated? Do you remember? And I said, yes. I said, that's why you're here. You're not here just for yourself. You're to light everything up. Light it up. You've already made the commitment, Charles, that when you're on stage or wherever you are, you're going to be the best at who and what you are. Now it's time to take it to the luminosity and understand that you came here as a divine emanation. Whatever you create for the good of other people, and all of that will take care of you. We'll get you one. We finally got you one. Once you step out into it, just understand that your needs will be taken care of. I was done with church at that time, by the way. This little Pentecostal boy had just shouted his way right out of the church. Couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't understand. But Lion King had become my sanctuary. I moved to Los Angeles on an intuitive hit. It's time to go, and I knew exactly where I was supposed to go. I was supposed to go to LA. I arrived in LA. First weekend, my roommate asked me the $1 million question. Hey man, want to go to church? I said, man, I don't do church. I don't do church anymore. He said, no, this is not like church. I said, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. He said, no, it's not. I said, what's the name of the church? He said, it's called Agape. I said, okay. Well, Carl Anderson was a member of Agape and was telling me about Agape at one time. And, okay, I'll come, but I'll be late. I walked into the sanctuary and it was packed. I saw one seat on the back wall, and I was walking. It's a meditative part of the service. This man standing up on the stage. dreads. He said, if you're conscious or aware or not, that right where you sit or stand is exactly where you're supposed to be, I'm here to tell you that you are in your right place. You are in your perfect place. Ricky helped them feel it. Ricky Byers-Beckwith hit a chord that struck every cell in my body. It sounded like those chords that my grandmother played on her knees. Another indication that right where I was right where I was supposed to be. There are no mistakes. When I started writing my first book, Intuitive Rebel, I said, God, you set me up, didn't you? It's all been a divine setup. The good, the bad, and the awful. But they've all come into my existence as a leaping off point for me to leap further into my greater good, and then to take others with me as we light it all up. This morning I invite you to light it up. You'll see a lot of lights in the coming weeks. A lot of smiles, Christmas lights, ornaments. But I dare you to light it up for the rest of the time that you're here. To give it every single thing that you got. I look at, we take the newspaper and we call the newspaper our prayer request because it seems as if everything is a worst case scenario. Even when you look at the news sometimes, it's like, okay, where's the positive side of it? And we are on the front line. It is shifting, it's changing, our world is. And as we find our voice, continue finding our voice, we'll continue to change, everything will change around us. But if nothing else from today's message, just know that you've been set up. Something has set you up, and it's not for failure. It's to succeed at whatever it is that you know that you've been called to do. That whoever you're supposed to meet, whatever path you are trotting now, is a path of success. I'm a witness. I've been touring churches for the last 7 years. I didn't know how this was going to work. Speaking and singing every Sunday, at least 45 Sundays out of the year. Sometimes 45 to 48. And when I first started, I heard Spirit say, I got you. I got you. So in this trust, in this moment of pure confidence in pure spirit, I thank you once again for your deep listening, for your heart resonating, because we are one. There is no separation. One and the same. We just have different names. Called all by Spirit. Thank you so much. Happy holidays and God bless you.